They built a fence on my land, so I made their entire backyard useless. And no, that's not an exaggeration. That's exactly what happened. And honestly, if you've ever dealt with neighbors who think close enough applies to property lines, you're going to feel this one real quick. So picture this. I'd been living in that house for just over a decade. Quiet little corner lot in a neighborhood called Brook Hollow Ridge. Nothing fancy. Just one of those places where people mow their lawns on Sundays and wave at each other like everything's permanently fine. My house had this wide open backyard. No fence, just grass stretching out farther than most lots around, and a clean natural line of old maple trees marking where my property ended, or at least where everyone assumed it ended, because for 11 years, nobody questioned it, not once. And I liked it that way. No barriers, no boxed-in feeling, just space. The kind of space that makes your house feel bigger than it actually is. Then everything changed when the house behind mine sold. New couple moved in, late 20s maybe, clean-cut, ambitious energy. The kind of people who show up and immediately start improving everything like they're flipping the place even if they're not. Within days, new roof, new siding, landscaping crews in and out like it's a construction site instead of a home. And I remember thinking, all right, they've got money. They've got plans, cool. But then 2 weeks in, a fencing company shows up. Not just a quick little boundary fence either. I'm talking tall, fresh cedar panels, pressure-treated posts, metal brackets still shining in the sun. The whole thing looked like it came straight out of a catalog. By the end of the day, that fence wrapped around their entire backyard. Clean lines, tight corners, except for one thing. It didn't look right. And you know that feeling when something's off, but you can't immediately explain it. Like a picture frame slightly tilted, or a door that doesn't fully close. That's what this was. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was just the angle, maybe I was overthinking it. But the next morning, I grabbed a measuring tape, because something in my gut wouldn't let it go. From the corner maple tree to where the fence should have been. I knew that distance. I'd walked it 1,000 times. 30 feet, give or take. Now, 22 feet. I measured it again, slower this time. 22 feet. That's when it hit me. 8 feet of my backyard was sitting on the other side of their brand new fence. And I just stood there for a second, staring at it, like my brain was trying to negotiate with reality. Because 8 feet doesn't sound like a lot until you see it. It's the difference between open space and feeling boxed in. It's the difference between your yard and their yard. So yeah, I walked over and knocked on their door. The husband answered. Name was Kyle. Confident smile. The kind that feels friendly until you realize it's not really listening. I kept it calm, casual, told him the fence looked like it might have been built inside my property line. Not accusing, just raising a concern. He didn't even hesitate. Said their contractor followed the survey stakes. I asked if I could take a look at the survey. Simple request, right? He said he didn't have it on hand, but assured me, and I mean assured, that the guys knew what they were doing. And there was something about the way he said it, like the conversation was already over in his head. I pushed a little, asked if they'd be open to double-checking before finishing the last section of the fence. That's when the tone shifted, just slightly, but enough. He said the job was already paid for. And besides, he actually said this. It looks great where it is. And right there, that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was convenience. Because moving it would cost money. And apparently, my land was cheaper. Still, I didn't snap. Not yet. I just nodded, said all right, and walked back to my house already knowing what my next step was. 2 days later, I had my own survey scheduled. Because if there's one thing I've learned, never argue opinion when you can bring facts. The surveyor showed up early morning, older guy, quiet, methodical, spent hours measuring every inch of that property like he'd done it 1,000 times, which he probably had. And when he was done, he planted these bright orange flags. One by one, straight line, clear as day, and every single one of those flags sat 8 feet inside their fence. Not close, not debatable. 8 feet. I took pictures, documented everything, emailed it over to them. Clean, polite, professional. No response. A week passed, nothing. So I knocked again. Kyle opened the door, same expression, but this time there was a hint of annoyance under it. I brought up the survey, showed him the photos. And his response? He shrugged. Actually shrugged. Said moving the fence would cost thousands, suggested maybe we just leave it since I still had plenty of yard. And I remember asking him, real slow, so you're seriously suggesting I just give you 8 feet of my property? And he didn't even flinch. Just said, fences aren't always perfect. Then closed the door. Just like that. No discussion, no compromise, nothing. And standing there on his porch, staring at that closed door, that's the moment something shifted in me. Because up until then, I'd been trying to be reasonable. But now I realized something very simple. He wasn't going to fix it. Which meant I was going to have to. Now before I tell you what I did next, let me pause the story for a second, because this is where things get interesting, not just emotionally, but legally and psychologically too. Because what Kyle did, that wasn't just a little mistake. That's actually a pretty common situation, and it plays out the same way more often than you'd think. According to standard procedure, anytime you're installing a permanent structure like a fence, especially one tied to property boundaries, you're supposed to verify the exact lot lines through an official survey, not just trust a contractor eyeballing stakes or reusing old markers, because those can be wrong, moved, or flat out ignored. And from a legal perspective, property lines aren't flexible, they're not close enough. They're exact, down to inches. If someone builds on land that isn't theirs, even accidentally, that's called encroachment, and depending on the state, it can open the door to lawsuits, forced removal, or even adverse possession claims if it goes unchallenged long enough. But here's the part most people miss. This is a psychological trap. Because once someone builds something expensive, like a full cedar privacy fence, their brain flips into defense mode. They stop asking, am I right? And start asking, how do I justify staying right? And that's exactly what Kyle was doing, minimizing the issue, shifting the cost burden onto me, acting like losing 8 feet of land was just a minor inconvenience. It's not about the land at that point. It's about control, ego, and not wanting to admit a mistake that costs money. And if you let that slide, that small mistake becomes permanent real fast. So yeah, at this point, I had 2 choices. Let it go, or remind him exactly where the line was. And I chose the second one. So after that door closed in my face, I stopped trying to convince him, because at that point, it wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a standoff, and I already knew something he was pretending not to understand. That strip of land, those 8 feet sitting behind his brand new fence, still legally belonged to me. Fence or no fence, permission or not. And once that clicked, the whole situation flipped in my head. Because if it's my land, I don't need his agreement to use it. I just need to use it strategically. So I went digging, not in the yard, not yet, but in the property records, county filings, zoning notes. I wanted to be absolutely sure there wasn't some HOA rule or weird easement that could come back and bite me. And everything checked out clean. No shared access, no restrictions on landscaping structures along that boundary. Nothing that said I couldn't build something on my side of the line, even if that side happened to sit behind his fence. And yeah, I'll admit it, that's when the idea started forming, slow at first, then clearer, then kind of perfect. Because here's the thing, I didn't want to tear the fence down myself. That would have escalated things fast, maybe even legally messy. No, I wanted him to choose to fix it. I just needed to make keeping it there uncomfortable enough. So the following week, I made a few calls, nothing dramatic, just a local landscaping company. Told them I needed some post-installation and planter boxes set along a very specific line. They showed up early Monday morning, small excavator, crew of 3, truck loaded with lumber and concrete forms, the kind of setup that makes people look out their windows even if they don't wanna. And right on schedule, Kyle and his wife stepped out onto their deck, coffee in hand, trying to figure out why there was construction happening inside their fenced backyard. I walked out, gave a quick wave like this was the most normal thing in the world. The crew got to work immediately, marking the line, my line, exactly where those survey flags had been. And then the digging started. Right there, just inside his fence. You could see the confusion hit first, then the realization, then that slow, creeping frustration. Kyle came down from the deck, walked over, trying to keep it together but clearly not thrilled. Hey, what's going on? And I kept it calm, same tone I'd used the first time I knocked on his door. I'm installing posts on my property. He glanced at the fence, then back at me. That's inside my yard. And that's when I pointed, not at the fence, but at the ground. At the boundary. He followed my finger, saw the flags, the same ones he'd ignored a week earlier. And for a second, he didn't say anything. Because there wasn't really anything he could say. The crew kept working. And I mean they didn't slow down. Holes dug deep, concrete poured, one post after another going in, thick steel, solid, permanent, not decorative, not subtle. 12 of them, evenly spaced across that entire 8-foot strip. And the whole time, Carl just stood there, watching it happen. Not stopping it, not arguing, just processing. Because now the situation wasn't theoretical anymore. It was physical. By the end of day 2, those posts were locked in, concrete set, alignment perfect, and that's when we added the second layer. Large wooden planter boxes, about 4 feet tall, mounted clean across the line of posts. And then came the part that really tied it all together. We filled them with soil and planted bamboo. Fast-growing, dense, vertical bamboo. The kind that doesn't just grow, it takes over space. Now, if you've never seen bamboo up close, here's what you need to understand. It doesn't grow politely. It grows aggressively, thick stalks, wide leaves, shoots popping up faster than you expect. Within weeks, you've got coverage. Within months, you've got a wall. And that's exactly what happened. Because by the time summer rolled in, that 8-foot strip had transformed into something completely different. A solid green barrier, 8 feet tall, dense enough to block sight lines, thick enough to block sunlight, and positioned perfectly to sit directly between their deck and everything they just paid to renovate. Their brand new outdoor furniture, shaded. Their landscaped yard, darker. Their open view, gone. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, but it was effective. And the best part? Every inch of it was legally mine. I didn't hear from them right away, not the next day, not even the next week. But about a month in, there was a knock on my door. I already knew who it was. Carl stood there, no smile this time. No casual confidence, just tired and maybe a little humbled. Hey, can we talk? I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, gave him my full attention. He gestured toward the fence, the bamboo, the now very different backyard behind him. Said it was affecting their space, blocking light, ruining the feel of their yard. And I listened, didn't interrupt, didn't argue. Because I'd already heard all of this before, just from the other side. Then he asked, carefully this time, if I'd consider removing the planters, maybe trimming it back, doing something to open things up. And I let that sit for a second. Then I said, real simple. Maybe. Pause. If the fence moves. No attitude, no sarcasm, just a condition. And you could see it land. Because now the situation made sense to him. Not emotionally, but logically. He nodded slow. Didn't argue, didn't deflect. Just said he'd talk to his contractor. 2 weeks later, the same fencing company came back. But this time, they weren't building. They were undoing everything. Panel by panel, post by post. The entire fence came down. And then, carefully, precisely, they rebuilt it. Exactly where it should have been from the beginning. Right along that line of orange flags. No guessing, no shortcuts, no close enough. And the moment that last section was finished, that's when I made my move. The crew came back one final time. Removed every planter box, pulled the bamboo, cleared the posts, restored the strip completely. Just like that, the wall disappeared. Sunlight came back into their yard. Their space opened up again. And me? I got my 8 feet back. 8 feet that had never stopped being mine. The difference now was, everybody understood that. So yeah, that's how it ended. No shouting match, no lawsuit, no dramatic showdown in a courtroom. Just a quiet correction of a line that should have never been crossed in the first place. And if you're listening to this thinking, okay, but was all that really necessary? Honestly, yeah, it was, because situations like this aren't really about land. They're about boundaries, literal and psychological. The lesson here is, people will often test limits when they think the cost of being wrong is lower than the reward of getting away with it. And in this case, Carl didn't wake up one morning planning to steal 8 feet of land. But once the fence was up, once the money was spent, once the inconvenience of fixing it became real, his brain made a decision. Minimize the problem, shift the burden, hope I'd let it go. And that's where most people lose, not because they're wrong, but because they don't want the hassle, they don't want conflict, paperwork, awkward conversations, so they compromise little by little, until what's theirs doesn't feel like theirs anymore. But here's the thing, Boundaries don't enforce themselves. Not in property, not in life. If I had backed down, even just to keep the peace, that fence would have stayed exactly where it was, and over time, that 8 feet, it stops being disputed and starts becoming accepted. And that's how people slowly lose ground, legally, socially, mentally. From a legal perspective, I did the one thing that matters most in these situations. I documented everything and acted on it. I got a survey. I created a record. I made it clear that the boundary was known and enforced. Because the worst thing you can do in a property dispute is nothing. Silence can be interpreted as agreement over time, depending on where you live. But what really resolved this wasn't the survey alone. It was leverage. And not aggressive, reckless leverage, but controlled, lawful pressure. I didn't damage their fence. I didn't trespass. I didn't escalate emotionally. I just used my property in a way that made ignoring the problem impossible. And that's an important distinction, because a lot of people, when they feel wronged, jump straight to retaliation, loud, messy, sometimes illegal, and that usually backfires. This was different. This was patience, planning, and understanding exactly where the line was, literally and figuratively. This is a psychological trap a lot of people fall into, thinking that being nice means being passive, that avoiding conflict is the same as resolving it. It's not. Sometimes the most effective response isn't confrontation, it's consequence. Because once Kyle experienced the downside of his decision, not abstractly, but physically, every time he stepped into his yard and saw that wall of bamboo, that's when the equation changed. Suddenly, fixing the fence wasn't expensive. Not fixing it was. And that shift, that's what made the resolution happen. Now, could this have gone differently? Yeah, absolutely. If he had just checked the survey at the beginning. If he had been willing to pause the project for one day. If he had taken that first conversation seriously instead of brushing it off. We wouldn't even be talking about this. And that's probably the biggest takeaway here. A lot of conflicts don't start because people are malicious. They start because people are careless. And then ego takes over. So here's something to think about. If you were in that situation, on either side, what would you have done? Would you have pushed back like ID? Or would you have let it slide to avoid the headache? And if you were Kyle, at what point do you admit the mistake? Before the fence goes up? After the survey? Or only when the consequences start showing up in your own backyard, literally? Because at the end of the day, this wasn't about winning. It was about making sure the line stayed where it belonged. And sometimes, that means you have to remind people exactly where that line is.